stepping them off to cut off the disruption.
Written and directed by Sean Wilkie, we are talking The Bench. And this is actually a movie that started production in 2007, but for whatever reason was abandoned partway through and only now has been completed. So technically speaking, it is a 2024 movie because this is when it has first come out, but it was actually primarily filmed in 2007. And this was a movie made to be a celebration, so to speak, of movies like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the kind of grindhouse 70s sort of style of movie, but in particular the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it follows a similar plot to that. It is a Scottish movie, a fact that I'll be coming on to again shortly. And effectively it tells the story of a group of friends going on a kind of camping expedition, effectively. They come across someone who is broken down, and they are going to a particular kind of farmhouse that they have inherited, and so they all decide to go together. Once they're there, the partying starts, but there may be darkness lurking nearby, as there seems to be a deranged killer with blood on his mind. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. Now, as I've mentioned, this movie was kind of inspired by and is somewhat homaging Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you can definitely see its influence on this film. So if you like Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, you may want to check it out because it definitely has such a big influence here in the style of the movie. For example, there is quite a lot of brutality in this movie. The killer here is rather demented, rather kind of violent. He uses a variety of methods to his victims, but we get, and not including anything else, but we get a drill bit through the eye, we get a vice squishing a head and various kind of stabs and things like that. So there is quite a variety of way of dispatching. So it has that brutality and that sort of like, oh, that was a nasty way to go kind of feeling that you would have in those movies. It kind of films it in a similar way, so we'll come on to that as well. The movie has this kind of, I mean, again, partly because it's actually a 2007 movie in the way that it was filmed. It obviously has certain technologies. It was the kind of like the early days of kind of mobile phones and things, and we don't have all the amenities that we had obviously today. But it has that sort of just a look of the film as well. That kind of like this again, video recording equipment wasn't as readily available, so it has a somewhat kind of like gritty feel to it, so to speak. So yeah, it definitely captures, I would say, the way that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, felt, I would imagine, to obviously these people who are clearly such a big fan of it. I would say the acting is kind of fairly sort of solid. It casts pretty much all Scottish actors, and they all kind of interact. A lot of them like they are genuine kind of friends. The way they kind of their sort of personalities are with each other. There's a couple of like humorous kind of lines here and there and things like that. A couple of arguments, but the acting, I would say. Possibly they may even know each other outside of this movie, I don't know, but it kind of feels like, the acting here was solid enough for this movie, I should say. Now, the writing of the characters and how they act sometimes maybe isn't quite as realistic, but that's more the writing, I would suggest, rather than the actual performances themselves. I mean, the movie's plot is quite light, but I think because this movie isn't trying to do anything too complex in regards to a twisting narrative, it feels somewhat kind of easy to follow, which is kind of a good thing, because what I am going to say next is, because this movie is Scottish, I found the dialogue incredibly hard to follow. So that's the problem, I think, here. Now, if you're not from the UK, Scotland's right at the top, I'm right down the bottom of the British Isles there. So, yes, technically speaking, we're not all that far away, but there's many different accents in the UK, and I actually found this quite hard to follow in regards to some of their obviously very thick accents. And as a result, I missed a lot of dialogue, quite a lot of dialogue here, because a lot of the dialogue is, you know, it's people in panic or people arguing, people drunk, things like this. So I didn't catch probably half of what was said, if I'm completely honest with you. Now, there's nothing, you know, there's nothing really that can be done about that. It is a Scottish movie. They are speaking with a Scottish accent, so, you know, what else would you expect? I didn't catch all the dialogue. Now, maybe as a result of that, I didn't feel like I got to know the characters all that well. Because, like I say, because I couldn't 100% understand everything that was being said. Now, I wouldn't say maybe it's not all of that. Maybe we didn't get quite as good a feeling of the individuals as maybe we could have done. They all kind of seemed somewhat a gelatinous group, to be honest with you. I didn't feel there was much individuality with them, but as I say, it's kind of for multiple reasons there. So there is that. Now, if you have seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, despite that movie being quite brutal, you know, we don't actually see all that much on screen, and that is true of this one. And I think it comes across as being more noticeable here because the movie pans away or edits right when we are seeing the actual kind of moment of death and things like that, the impacts. So the film, I think, could have got away with it, but I think it becomes a little bit more noticeable, unlike, I would say, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which had this kind of this aura of being such a brutal film, but in actual fact, when it comes down to it, it was more done psychologically. But I think this movie doesn't quite manage to do this because it does it so often, and you just notice it a little more. You know, you'll get right, the drill bit will come into the eye, then it'll cut, and things like this, and we go, ah! Now I wonder, and I don't know, this is speculation on my part, is because this movie was abandoned partway through, some of these scenes weren't finished, and instead what we got was like a bit of shaky cam, or you know, a bit of the wall. That's all we kind of see, and things like that. And that's how they kind of edit it, because these shots weren't finished. But whatever the reason, is that we don't see a whole lot on the actual screen, unfortunately. And I would say the other thing I noticed in the same way is the editing is slightly choppy here. I would say there's some awkward transitions from one scene to another. Maybe it was a stylistic choice in some sequences, but in some elements I found it quite jarring, when the movie just kind of like has a kind of like hard cut and then goes into another scene. Again, I wonder perhaps because this movie wasn't completed in 2007 when it was initially shot, it makes it so it's somewhat kind of lacking, because there were certain scenes that were just not filmed, and as such the edit was kind of a little bit jarring kind of here and there. As I've mentioned, the movie is relatively simple. I mean, in some ways this was a positive, because I couldn't completely understand the dialogue. You know, I got the gist of the story without necessarily getting a lot of the dialogue. So there is that. But at the same time, this isn't a particularly kind of complicated story. So those who want a more of a in-depth narrative, as I say, this is a relatively kind of simple, you know, strangers go onto some land and something is attacking them. There is kind of that. The killer, I would say, isn't particularly memorable, I would suggest. Leatherface, quite iconic. Everyone will know Leatherface. Here, it's just a guy with long hair, and I was like, I don't know if I fully am buying into, you know, the guy, basically. And we get a little bit of kind of context just about his backstory, but I don't know if it was fully enough. And then we see like an old photograph and it looks kind of the same, things like that. Overall, I think this is a watchable horror film if you are a big slash fan, particularly if you are a Texas Chainsaw Massacre enthusiast. I don't really think it elevates outside of just being kind of like a watchable film for most. It's kind of fine, but it's not really outstanding anyway. It's curious because obviously the circumstance of this movie being made, being it ultimately mostly filmed in 2007, but it's just okay. So I want to give this one a 5 out of 10, which is a bang on average score in the way I kind of score things here. So have you seen it? Would you see it based on what I've told you? Please leave me a comment and I shall look forward to you next time. Bye for now.